we replaced the lamb for cricket mince from Yumbug. And I think it's 17 times less carbon.
Once we've installed solar panels, we know what we can generate. Once we've returned on the initial capital investment, then effectively we're generating electricity for free.
From the forum, I personally, I love coming to the meetings. It is really inspiring, really energising. I think the forum is different to others because it's focused on action.
A fertiliser, which then is used on our fields for wheat generation, that's then harvested by one of our companies that's turned into flour that goes back to make our dough.
Because we're talking about sustainability and we're talking about big problems, we need to come together to come at solutions and come up with solutions for these massive problems.
Hello and welcome to the Zero Carbon Forum webinar series on the transition, how to thrive in a 1.5 degree world. I'm Bob Gordon, Director at the Forum. I'm here at McDonald's UK headquarters with Helen McFarlane, Head of Sustainability.
Hi
Helen,
Bob.
how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Good, I'm good, thank you. Thanks for giving us your time.
It's all good.
Let's get straight into it. Tell us your journey, first of all. You've been at McDonald's 34 years.
34 years, yeah.
And in a sustainability role for 14 of those.
Yes.
So you've been at the heart of it for 14 years.
Yeah.
What's the approach? What's the philosophy? How do you approach sustainability here?
Well, sustainability has been on a journey as well. So we've sort of historically worked across two teams. So we've always had a sustainable sourcing team. So within the supply chain, there's been an agriculture team, and they've been focused on sustainably sourcing our food primarily. The environment team was really focused on our restaurants and reducing energy, increasing recycling, preventing litter.
Yeah.
But the impacts of what we do in our restaurants on the environment. So the two teams merged probably only about 6 years ago. The two teams merged. So now we are the Sustainable and Ethical Sourcing team.
Okay.
So I'm the Sustainability Manager within that, with responsibility for our climate roadmap and our circularity plan.
Tell us about your climate roadmap and your circularity plan. What do they look like? How's that all broken down?
So our climate roadmap, we started with targets. So we, in the UK, set ourselves a net zero target of 2040.
This is science-based target?
Science-based target. Aligned to the science-based target.
Okay.
So our global corporation has set a science-based target.
Yeah.
Science-based initiative with a net zero target of 2050, but aligned to the 1.5 degree scenario.
Yeah.
So we have 2030 targets of a 50% reduction at restaurants, a 50% reduction at supply facilities, 50% reduction in land use change emissions, and 16% reduction in overall FLAG, so scope 3 farm level emissions. Now in the UK, we went slightly further than that because we like to in the UK. So we set ourselves a 2040 net zero emissions target because we wanted to align at the time with other British retail and also, importantly, with the National Farmers Union. So our supply chain makes up over 95% of our emissions.
Yeah.
There's little at restaurants and offices, and that's because we've done a lot of work at restaurants and offices already. We have renewable energy across all of our renewable electricity across all of our restaurants and offices. We've done a lot of work on reducing electricity consumption and also recycling our waste. We're also building new restaurants to a net zero standard.
Yes.
Which is exciting, and also
that standard's been in place a while.
Big learning journey. Yes, yeah, and we don't have to do it. So we need to reach a net zero in operation to reach our net zero standard. But we also said that we will build our new restaurants, our new freeholds, to a net zero standard in construction. Which,
right. Okay.
Yeah, which is quite a challenge, to be fair, but we're achieving it. We've got 3 so far and 16 more on the horizon. So yeah.
Okay, and that is a challenge. I mean, we see lots of operators looking at that across the sector. Things like a timber frame is a huge way to get some net zero in construction, but really hard to do.
Yeah, really hard to do. But yeah, our modular building suppliers have been absolutely fantastic in terms of coming on that journey with us and really helping us, as well as our architects and planners. They are absolutely key to this in terms of finding the ways to build the restaurants in the right way.
Okay, so that's really interesting. So the structure is all of that work that's been done to make your restaurants net zero in their construction and operation.
Mm-hmm.
And then the big stuff is the scope 3, like you say, 95% of your emissions.
Yeah.
How does that break down? I mean, I'm presuming the vast majority of it is beef, dairy, chicken.
Yes, absolutely. So the majority of our scope 3, and when we're talking about scope 3, typically our franchisees, so our franchise restaurants and our waste would also fall into scope 3, but we report them, or the activity for that falls into our restaurants and offices bucket. So they would be covered by our restaurants and offices roadmap.
Yes, so whilst they're officially scope 3, you
Yeah.
manage them like they're scope 1 and 2.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, because that's under our direct control.
Yeah.
So the scope 3 within supply chain is under our suppliers' control. So it's about working with and influencing our suppliers. And the majority of that scope 3 would sit at farm level. So what is now termed as FLAG.
Yes.
Within beef, chicken and dairy, like you say, would be our top 3.
Yeah, okay. Just remind us what FLAG stands for.
Forest, land and agriculture
Yeah.
emissions.
Okay. And this
Yeah.
is part of SBTI's target setting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so tell us what you're doing then to understand those emissions better and reduce those emissions.
Yeah, so we have very long-term close working relationships with our suppliers. So we work with our suppliers firstly to get them to set targets. So we've set an SBTI target. If they have an SBTI target, then obviously they're going to have to figure out how to get there as well. So that was the first thing we did. Secondly, we have lots of touch points, both sort of in a more informal setting, I guess. So coming together to talk through problems and solutions as part of a business planning process. So our suppliers would come to us. We have a 3-year business planning cycle, and they need to come to us with their plans of what they're going to be investing in over the next 3 years. And so that is split down into categories around things like you'd expect, like capacity planning, so how they're going to meet the demands of our sales growth over the next few years. But also within that, we have our sustainability targets. So we have packaging, so how they're going to reduce packaging and also help us to recycle all of our packaging, and then the net zero targets. So those are part of the business planning cycle. Third thing that we've done is set up what we've called, in our short term, a net zero supplier technical advisory group.
Okay, snappy.
Snappy title. But basically what that is working with our top 7 suppliers. So from beef, chicken, dairy and also potatoes, because potatoes are huge volume and doing some fantastic work in regen. So we're working with those 7, literally 7 people who are incredibly technical, who are running sustainability teams for their suppliers within those 7 categories. Those 4 categories, 7 suppliers. But they're running their sustainability team, so they have the power to influence in terms of, the way that they're going to develop their practices. So we look primarily with that small group just at the FLAG emissions, so just at farm level and what we can do there. We always run research projects, so we have research projects in pretty much everything we do, because we have to test before we roll anything out to make sure that we are completely clear in terms of what's happening. So probably our main research projects in regen, we have one at FAI Farms in Oxford, which is a research farm, but you can literally, it's where we take people to go to actually see what we call like regen in action. So you can see the cows out on the land, you can see the grass is this high, you can hear cuckoos, it's incredible, and you can see it, feel it, touch it, and we would take people there, and the farm manager there is incredibly passionate. So we've been working there at FAI Farms for years, and got incredible amounts of data on what works. But that is a research farm, not a commercial farm. So the other place that we're working with our suppliers, and it's not owned by us, but it's a farm up on the borders of Wales in Brongain. It's part of Pigstock. Is one of our suppliers. It's an abattoir and a processing facility all in one place. So there they have been working on how to build it or grow or develop a net zero blueprint for farmers that will run commercially as well as environmentally.
Okay,
And
interesting.
that is incredibly successful. And Greg Pickstock, who runs that farm, again, is very passionate about what he does, has got fantastic data. It's still in progress, it's still work in progress, but at least that's somewhere that, you know, Greg as a farmer can talk to other farmers in their language and talk about, you know, how this isn't just a nice to do. It actually makes money, it's commercially viable, as well as it will become a net zero farm of the future.
And regen is quite different to organic, isn't it? In a not necessarily in terms of the agricultural practices, but in terms of the approach we're taking. So organic typically might reduce yield in many cases, and whilst it might, I don't know, for example, on an organic chicken, you will reduce some of your environmental impacts because you're reducing pesticides and the like, but you'll actually on organic chicken, you're increasing the carbon footprint of the chicken because it eats more and lives longer.
Yeah.
But regen is looking for more kind of balanced approach where you maintain yields, you become commercially viable. It's effectively, how do we transition the entire of a farming sector from intensive agriculture to regenerative agriculture? Is that... You talked about transition a few times as well, but within the farming sector. Is that something you're seeing? Is that language being taken up? Are farmers kind of seeing this radical change to the way that they produce?
I don't think farmers will see it as a radical change. I think farmers will see it as they know they need to change. It's really tough for farmers out there, as we all know.
Yep.
I think in order for farmers to remain viable and have, as we keep talking about, a resilient, you know, model for the future, they need to understand, you know, how they're going to make money and how's the best way they're going to make money. And then one of the ways is to reduce their inputs. So that lends itself to regenerative agriculture practices, because we're not, you know, using fertilizer on the land. So we talk about it in terms of things like adaptive multi-paddock grazing. So thinking about, you know, changing those practices on farm. So you're just talking about the grazing patterns. We're talking about outwintering cattle, so that you're reducing, you know, the feed that you need, and obviously reducing fertilizer. A lot of talk is about genetics, so about what farming or what cows are going to look like in the future, and more efficient ways of rearing, or more efficient ways of, you know, creating that end product, or the protein, if you like.
You've used the word transition a few times, talking largely about transition in the way that we produce food. How are you imagining transition in the way it applies to McDonald's, or in the way it applies to hospitality?
So in terms of McDonald's, people always say, you know, we're primarily a burger business, right? We sell a lot of beef, we also sell a lot of chicken. So would it be easy just to say, oh, we're just going to stop selling beef? And that's, you know, that's our transition plan to net zero. Is kind of easier to get there with chicken. But that's clearly not the answer for a couple of reasons. I mean, obviously it's our brand, it's our, you know, this is what we were built on. But also we have, you know, over 23,000 British and Irish farmers supporting us every year. We're not just going to abandon them. We want to continue to support them and help move the beef industry along, but, you know, help create a resilient beef supply for the future. We're not saying people should stop eating beef. We're just saying that, you know, can we produce beef in a way that's better for the environment?
Lower impact and more resilient to the impacts of it. Yeah,
exactly. And the climate action plan was really interesting to us because, well, for two reasons. One, because you're coming with a very different perspective. You know, if we're sat within our business saying, here's our roadmap, we're essentially going to be doing the things that we know or that other markets are doing, but we know within the business is, you know, potentially going to work, and then look at, well, we need some more innovation. From look at Forum, looking at our plan and giving us our climate action plan, you've, you know, brought up different things. And, you know, we look at menu. Okay, we're not going to talk about menu right now because we don't know what we're going to do doing about menu, but it does trigger that. It does trigger that to say, okay, we are going to be bringing menu into the conversation, clearly. What does that look like right now? I don't know. But we can look at others across the forum and say, well, look at what they're doing, you know.
Right, so those benchmarks then go to show the proportion of people who've already started on that part of the journey versus other parts of the journey. Yeah.
And also just give us examples and also people to talk to. Or we can reach out to you and say, you know, we need some help on Soy, who's doing some great work in that space. And
yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah.
And then the reduction activity, clearly you're implementing, once you've been through that measurement and planning on all of those, we talked about it a lot within the supply chain, you're then undertaking reduction activity.
Yeah.
Compliance, we use the word comply, but really we're talking about communication, whether it's to your investors, employees, customers, complying with their expectations.
Absolutely.
As well as, of course, legal compliance.
Yeah. And comply or communication means obviously different things at every different level of audience that you go to, and also setting up a climate governance group. So again, that's another thing that's probably been a bit of a blocker in the past in terms of where does that decision making sit. So if you're talking about climate specific or something that's going to mean decarbonisation in the future, where does that decision actually sit? Does it sit with the strategy teams? Does it sit with menu teams? Does it sit with supply chain? Having a climate governance group, which is necessary for TCFD, but also necessary to move the needle here, means that you've got an actual group to go to that will sit and have that governance piece over the whole of the net zero journey roadmap and allow that very clear decision making to happen.
Yeah, I just think that's tremendously valuable. I see a lot, companies with good governance are able to make good evidence-based decisions and move things forwards and get straight to reduce.
Yeah.
Companies without that strong governance framework, you just see it takes time to even get any momentum going.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
But within that then, you need to bring everyone on that governance group up to speed with, what does this all mean? That's, again, where the forum can help out with your...
Masterclass.
Yeah. Exactly that.
Yeah,
exactly that. So we've been talking to guys here about how we can make use of that and how we can bring everyone up to speed with what it all means.
And that's exactly what it's designed for, because if you can, the requirement to involve people who aren't close to it is important. Then the need to educate those people is important. And then you've got educated senior people who now get it in a way that they didn't get it before. Now you're much more likely to get very different conversations.
Exactly.
Particularly when you think about, I think a lot of people used to see sustainability as a do the right thing initiative.
Yeah.
Particularly at a senior level. And so it was something that you could do when the times were good and maybe let go discretionary activity when time's tough. But actually now, as there's greater understanding, particularly at a senior level, that this is as much about how climate is impacting the business.
Absolutely.
We mentioned potatoes briefly earlier. I know obviously, the amount of rainfall we've had this winter has impacted yields.
Yeah.
It's impacting production.
Yeah,
and the amount of rain we've had is in the last 18 months in the UK, it is the most rain that has ever fallen across an 18-month period in the UK.
Yeah.
This isn't just an anomaly. This is a definite trend as a result of climate change.
Exactly.
As senior people understand that, they go, well, I need to build resilience into my business.
Exactly. And if we use that language, if we talk about building resilience in, and then you think about what's the risk to the business, and we always frame things in what's the risk if we do nothing. And the risk if we do nothing is a physical risk from changing climate. It's a reputational risk if we just sit and do nothing, and it's also a financial risk if you've got a carbon price of the future, or if your customers are moving away to different brands. So, and then there is the risk to the farmers who can't afford to produce the food in the same way anymore. So, if you just look at framing it from a risk point of view, then that puts it into that. It then hardwires it into your business plans for the future to say, guys, we have to mitigate against all of this. We have to have a decarbonisation and net zero plan for the future to build that resilient and sustainable supply chain.
Tell me what value you get from the forum.
From the forum, I personally, I love coming to the meetings. It is really inspiring, really energising. I think the forum is different to others because it's focused on action, and it's not a kind of sitting around moaning. It's not a talking about legislation. It's very open. People don't tend to keep their cards in, so you can always find out what the barriers are for people, but also what people are doing well. You come along there, it's a really fast pace, you hear lots of ideas, you talk to your peers, and I know lots of people now that I could just pick the phone up and talk to and say, how's this going, or how would you solve for this? And you just the speakers that you have there, the breadth of topics that we talk about are fantastic.
I'm really pleased to hear you said that, but no, because I've spent too long in my career sitting in meetings that don't go anywhere, and we're quite ruthless, and we want this to be something that delivers value and moves the conversation forwards and connects you with all the people who can help. So I'm delighted it's doing all that for you. I'm just going to ask one final question. If you had one piece of advice for anyone in this space on how to be effective in reducing your emissions and building a more resilient business, what would that be?
Yeah, well, it's to follow the plan that, to be fair, the forum set out. So start with measuring. You've always got to have some data. So even if you can't measure your whole supply chain, just have some data to understand where you're at right now. And we would say then set a target so you know where you want to be. So you have the measurement, have a roadmap, even if it's a very broad roadmap, to say, this is where we are, this is where we're going to get to. In terms of that carbon reduction, you're not going to have all the answers right now. So when we set out our target, we said, okay, we're going to get to 2040. We're going to get net zero by 2040. We don't actually know how we're going to get there, but the answers will exist. Some of them exist now, and some of them will exist in the future. But it's so, so, so important to collaborate. Just remember that you're not in this on your own. Even if you are the one sustainability manager in your organisation, there are hundreds of people out there who can help you on this journey. So never feel like you're on your own. In your own organisation, you've got a plan, propose it to leadership, and then get a governance team in. So the governance team can oversee it, build it into the business plan, and help with those decision making.
I really like that. Be a consummate professional within your business. Go through a process, measure, plan, reduce. Do your job really well.
Yeah.
At the same time, remember you're not alone.
Yeah.
And I think, I've been there, you've been there. It can be quite isolating, quite lonely as a sustainability manager.
But turn up to one of the forum meetings and you'll see 100 people just like you. But
who are all there willing to help, and many
Exactly.
of them have the answers.
Exactly. Yeah.
Fabulous.
Fantastic.
Helen, thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.